Ready?
And I'm ready.
Okay, I think we're live. Welcome to the Seven C's of Real Estate. I'm Mandy St. Ange, and this is Vera Lynn Porter.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The 7 C's of Real Estate, where we talk about coffee, collaboration, cooperation, and contracts, closings, and what was the last one? Coffee, contracts,
Closing. It
closings,
is. It is
corporations,
corporation
collaboration,
collaboration. Yeah, and
and
coordination. Yeah, you are
yes,
right. You are
yes.
right. Yep.
So
Where
we
we
are
get we
here
get real
talking
all
about
things.
everything.
Yeah, where we get real all things real estate, and what it's like to essentially be working dual roles, right? and
Yes.
um, and all the things that are out there in real estate happening. The goal here to be collaborating with others and sharing and not being as the industry goes. We're trying to change the industry face and focus more on the fact that there's no reason to be competitive out there. It's better to be collaborative out there so we can all grow and benefit from one another. So, yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely what we're doing here.
Yep,
Yay!
yep. And I hear this week, Vera Lynn, you have had just an abundance of contracts representing buyers and sellers. And so we just felt like because of the fact that it's a topic that's fresh in your mind, that should be our hot topic this week. Essentially, the ideas of um, contracts, the who's, the what's, the why's, the how's. And as my mentor said, when you start to go under contract or you begin the negotiation phase, it's definitely the time when you start to really realize if you are working with a legitimate realtor or not. It really
Yes.
sets the bar. How detailed, how methodical is that individual? Are they really doing their due diligence and paying attention and representing their clients? And most importantly, are they educated on the contract process? And it's a hard thing, right? When we get our education and we get our license, there's tons of information that's spit at us. And we have lots of opportunity to become experts, at contracts, legally binding agreements. But really, until you get into the minutia, you don't know, and you don't necessarily know all of the nuts and bolts to the contract. And let's be honest, we live in a day where it's fast paced, and how many times is a terms agreement sent to you and you just check the box and say, yep, I've read it, and you move on, right? So I think there's
Yes.
a lot of agents and or buyers and sellers themselves that just do one of those kind of scan, look for the important pieces, and then check the box and move over. So I'd love to hear today from your perspective, why you think the contract process is, well, I guess knowing the contract, why is knowing the contract so important? And then ultimately, maybe some of the steps or the tips and tricks of how you help navigate the contract process with your buyers and sellers.
Yes. So yes, the contract part of you're that agent. You're going out, and you find that buyer that's willing to work with you, or that seller that's willing to work with you, and all of a sudden they say, yeah, we want to work with you. Let's go. Let's make a move. Um, I, Marilyn, for the buyers, here on Instagram, I want to educate our buyers. We want to educate, the sellers too, because it's very important to understand that contract process. And once you sign that contract, it's not just, it's a DocuSign where you just kind of find you get the contract sent to you, and you just kind of say, okay, this is me and my electronic signature, and you just kind of moving around, and you're initialing, and then signing at the very bottom. And, there you go. That contract now is legally binding between you and the agent, or you, the agent, the seller, the seller, the agent, and the buyer, and the buyer and the seller, depending on the situation, and it's so important. I'm going to talk more for the side of the buyer right now, because that's what I deal with, is for the buyers. The sellers are a whole different process altogether.
Mm-hmm.
But just to understand that when we're talking about contracts in general, we just want to make sure that we are paying close attention to the times that we put on those contracts. It's an effective date. When is the contract legally binding? For a buyer to find a house that they love, they place that offer on that house, and the seller accepts it. And now the seller signs on the bottom, as well as the buyer and the agents. So now this contract is now binding. Everything is ready to go. Day of, effective date. What shall we do? And where do we go from there? It's very important to understand that contract is legally binding. So that means that the time and acceptance portion of the contract, you have to pay attention as an agent when it goes in effective date, whether it's 5 days depending on the state, or 7 days, or whatever the case may be, 3 days. You just have to make sure you understand that process. A lot of agents get caught up in just getting the contract signed, and then they don't do any follow-up on the time frame, and that's not what we do. We have to pay attention to that.
There's a lot of
so important.
There's a lot of agents. There are a lot of agents out there, and I shouldn't laugh, because I remember being in this boat, and it wasn't about buying or selling. It was actually, I was helping somebody for the very first time with a lease, and I was like, well, how do I tell somebody that, like, they want to rent this house, right? Like, it's not like an apartment where you're handed over a piece of paper, right, from the landlord or the apartment complex, right? So I remember thinking, like, okay, silly question. What am I gonna do? How do I know what to do? So I called the agent, and in the MLS terms, it didn't say anything, right? Like, the MLS usually has remarks to the agents on what they want you to use or what they want you to do, right? Like, go to such and such website and have your client fill out the property management document, right? Send us a letter of interest, and then go to that website, or fill out a lease contract, whatever it may be, right? So this didn't have anything at all, and I was like, how am I going to tell them that my client wants to lease, right? And so I remember calling, and I was like, hey, what do I need to do? And the agent was very kind, and the agent was like, well, we're not a property management company. It just so happens that I'm helping a neighbor friend rent their home while they're abroad. And so,
wow.
Yeah, right. So she was like, so we need you to fill out the Texas lease contract. Oh, okay. No problem, right? The reason why I share that is I don't think that a whole lot of agents, like, we're not told that the keys to presenting the offer is the contract part. It's not always just picking up a phone and saying, hey, I have a client, they're interested in buying, right, the house. They want to buy the house at this price, and they want to buy the house, like, today. We agreed today that that's not how it works. And so what I want to reiterate is, just as you were saying, so important to understand that the contract is more than just that legal binding agreement. It's the keys to the castle. It's what locks in, or it starts the conversation, right? It starts the negotiation process, starts the offer process. And then once all of that is agreed upon, as you're talking about, the execution date, once all parties agree that this is what they're going to do, that execution date after signatures is huge, because it is the date that sets the timeline for everything else to fall into place, to get our clients, no matter what side we're on, get our clients to the closing table. You wouldn't just show up to the dental office just to show up to the dental office.
You have to make an appointment.
You have to make an appointment, right? You have to have a timeline on when all things are supposed to be done, right? And essentially, what you're stating, the execution date is what tees up that date to lock in place to us getting to that appointment to sign and close, and hand over the keys to the castle. So I think that's super important. And again, it's about being detailed. And are you really an agent who's spending time to be detailed in your work, and be able to share that information over, and or how to deliver that to your clients. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very important. People don't, COVID has changed a whole lot. Everything's quick and fast. The house goes up on the market, the house comes off the market. The house goes on the market, the house comes off the market. And just as quick as it goes up, it goes down, and people are just rushing through this process. And, we really gotta sit down and actually pay attention, because this is actually protecting your client. Whoever you're representing, whether you're representing both sides or one side of the deal, you have to be very careful, because at the end of the day, that's going to decipher where they're going to get their escrow if they don't want to go through with the process, or if they're gonna, if they're gonna have to fight for it. And the first thing that happens is the deal doesn't go right, and that time frame is not set, and you're not paying attention to that time frame based on that contract. You're sitting here looking like, okay, this person just lost, $15,000 of their escrow. You don't want to see that, and that hurts you, and it hurts your business. So you want to be very detailed about, signing that contract or putting that contract together and understanding the contract as an agent, because it is very important. And sometimes I don't even know, and I have to go back to my book, and I'm like, oh, okay, what is this part again? What does it say again? Because every deal is different. But just know that whatever deal you're going through, if you have your broker or anybody there that can go through the process, your association that you reached out to, they will go over that with you. They will direct you. They will help you. So don't think you're out here by yourself trying to figure it out. Because the last thing you need is to be, sitting there in front of a hearing board and saying, hey, this is what happened. Oh, I didn't know. Because you didn't know is not why that buyer, that seller decided to do business with you. They came to do business with you because they trust, they like you, and they know you. And that's the whole point of, getting this deal together and putting it, and just making things happen. So yeah, the contract is very important. And I just, I came across that because some people they sign that contract and they really don't know what they're signing. They're not paying attention until things go wrong.
Yeah, how much
That's
time?
That's that contract.
How much time do you spend? And I think it's important whether it's a new buyer or not. Like, the document is state to state, right? It's not like it's an inter-county thing, right? So in most cases, if you've got someone who's living in, I'm just going to say yours, Brevard, and then they're moving to outside of Brevard, and they're moving down south, right? And that's not going to change, right? The contract is what the contract is. And the same thing here. If someone's purchasing in Collin County, it's the same thing in Dallas County. The contract is what the contract is. So my point in saying that is, whether you're working with a buyer who's staying within the state and just moving around, or you're working with a buyer who's come from Texas to Florida, it's super important that we spend the time to make sure that they understand what they're going under contract, how they're going under contract, right? And why we're doing what we're doing, I think is super important. There's a lot of people that don't understand what earnest money is. They don't understand what an inspection period is. They don't understand, we have parts of our contract here that state as is. And when people hear that word as is, they typically think that I have to buy the house just like it is. I don't have the opportunity to have an inspection period, right? Like, I don't have the opportunity to have this house looked at and then come back to the seller and say, hey, we need to address these concerns, right? That's not the case. So I think that we have to be really good stewards of educating and not assuming that just because someone has purchased a home multiple times that they understand what all of this is. You know, maybe the first time they didn't take the opportunity to even read. And if they're coming
Exactly.
from another spot, what was important in another spot may not be important here, right? We have a lot of stuff that we have to focus on in Texas, acknowledging lead based paints and termites, things that are very state specific. I remember in
Hmm.
Colorado, there were things in our contracts that were related to Colorado, very state specific, radon, for example,
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
because of where we lived. So, I think we also have to not only be really good agents and um, know what's going on throughout the contract, like we said before, because it's a binding agreement and or it's showing that we can present strong offers or that we're good negotiators, we can set up good timelines, like that's all good. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to re-educate our clients
Yes.
so they know exactly what they're getting into and or why we're doing what we're doing. um, they entrust us, and so of course they believe that we're doing what we're doing to protect them or help them or serve them, but they should really understand what's taking place. Does that make sense? um,
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. You're hitting it right on the dot. It's the whole point is to understand that process for your buyer or seller, which is very important because that's when you have to sit down and you have to have that buyer consultation or that seller consultation and explain that to them. That's the best time to go over that contract, even if they haven't signed an offer. And I'm, thinking about it right now, it's like, you always heard when you first started in real estate, do a buyer's consultation. It's important to do that. Do a seller's consultation. It's important to do that. You know, it is because at that point you can go over the process with them as a buyer because like you said, they may have purchased properties over and over again, but not every property that they purchase is the same as the last property. So that contract, going over it with them, section by section and allowing them to understand and giving the opportunity for them to understand what each section means and how it's really detrimental and important for them going forward is the key to as a successful agent to explain that to them because like you said, we're here to educate.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not just about plugging and playing, data points. Especially in this climate when we are in such a crazy um, tailspin sometimes of
Mm-hmm.
negotiations, and sellers agents that are really asking um, for terms and agreements that we've not that we haven't seen before, but that they know that are not necessarily fair things to the buyer, and or maybe it's not even fair, but just asking of things. um, one thing that sticks in my mind that has been happening here quite consistently is asking for the appraisal addendum and for the appraisal to be waived. We're getting that a lot here in
Yes.
Texas. And, you know, it's a catch 22 thing because our buyers are feeling like they're squeezed already. They're already feeling
Mm-hmm.
like they have to go above and beyond where they would maybe want to go just to be competitive in the market. And then we're getting sellers agents that on top of that are saying, okay, great, take that, but I want you to agree that if the house comes back and it doesn't appraise, that you're still going to give us those funds. And I get
Mm-hmm.
it. I get why it's happening. Don't misunderstand. I can play both sides, and I can see why that's a fair thing for the seller to ask. The seller is
Mm-hmm.
asking that because the seller is agreeing to take their home off market and go under contract for something, right? We've said
Yes.
we've said period, or buyer has said, I'm going to pay you XYZ for this house. So the seller is asking for that because they feel like rightfully you said that you're going to give that to me. I want that, right? And just
Right.
because your bank says or the appraiser says, right, that the value of the house
Mm-hmm.
isn't worth that doesn't mean that what you told me and we agreed upon should change, right? So it takes
Correct.
a lot of time to be able to walk through that and educate our sellers on what that really means that we're asking of the buyer, and in the opposing part to really explain to the buyer that this is what this means. And it goes
Yeah.
back to, if you can't, the biggest thing that should go back to is, if you can't afford and or you don't have the means to be able to offer someone a price in which you can't
Mm-hmm.
fulfill, then in all fairness, you probably shouldn't. And you shouldn't probably be going after that particular home because you told someone you were going to pay that, right? In order to own
Mm-hmm.
that. That is no different than you leasing a vehicle and the car dealer saying you're going to have to pay $300 a month. You
Mm-hmm.
signing that agreement and then getting the car and all of a sudden saying, you know what? I really like this car doesn't seem like it's worth $300 a month. I'm gonna just pay you 200. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just it doesn't work that way. And so I think it's super important that people understand, um, again, as we've said, just all the parts that go to all phases, um, and be willing to educate our clients, and then also to be willing to educate even the agents.
Mm-hmm.
There's many times in the negotiation phase that I've had someone say, well, we're really looking for this in order to have a strong offer. Okay, well, I'd be
Mm-hmm.
willing to go back to my clients and share that, but I want to know why you think that that's okay, that you're asking for that. And why is your
Mm-hmm.
client asking for that?
Yeah.
um, because I think that that's super important, and the best way to be able to present the next term or the idea to the opposing side. Um, it's hard because this is as much as this is not supposed to be an emotional thing, and we're just supposed to be so transactional. Um,
Yes.
it's really hard not to be. And I think that the more education you can give someone, the more opportunity you can set the emotions aside and bring the transaction to the forefront. What are
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts?
So yeah, my thoughts are the same. And as much as you get into a contract before between the seller and the buyer, if you and that other agent, it's both of you are like the strong standing point for both sides. So as much as it's you're doing that negotiation period and explaining to your seller, or I'm explaining to my buyer, you know both sides need to be understanding and understand the purpose of the whole closing deal,
Mm-hmm.
getting that contract solidified. So yeah, it's very important. But you brought up something too, that time when you get that contract signed, and both parties, the meeting of the minds have occurred, and now you're talking about the inspection period
Mm-hmm.
of that contract, that inspection time frame. That is the time frame of how long that house is going to be on the market. And again, we're coming back to the seller now having to take his house off the market for a certain period of time with no interaction with other potential buyers.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're sitting here in this process, and now that part of that inspection period, yes, can occur. However, you can always, as an agent, for the seller, on the seller side, say, hey, listen, we can go ahead and take this house off the market for the next 7 days or 10 days, however many days it's going to be. However, we can always counter offer that, where we can get someone to, we can allow them to go ahead and do their thing, but we can also show that property just for the backup process of it, just to accept those backup offers, and people don't realize that is negotiable, and as a buyer and as a seller, as a buyer's agent, you have to explain that to your buyer, and the seller's agent has to explain that to their seller, so everybody's understanding that even though this is during this negotiation period, you still have some say on what is going to happen. You know what I mean? And it's so important for the contract to be stating that. And if it doesn't, don't play games.
Yeah.
And a lot of people still play games during their contract period and in that inspection period. But what does that inspection period mean to you in your side? How do you relate? Do you have like any issues with the inspection period or have experienced any of that during the contract phase? That part of that negotiation phase of the contract?
No, I mean, there's twofold. So the inspection period becomes quite interesting for me because it's not typically utilized in a wholesaler's environment. Because typically we're looking at purchasing that home as is. And in most cases, the reason why, Verilyn, I mean, we know that if you're purchasing that home in an investor's space, you're ultimately going to have it inspected, and you're ultimately going to have a general contractor out there at some point anyways. Like, you're not taking the house, putting some paint on it, and selling it again, right? You know that you're making some changes. So the inspection period from a wholesaler's perspective and or an investment's perspective is a little bit different. And not all of our investors actually take that inspection period because they don't need to, right? If you will, because they're already going to do that, and that's not going to hinder them from making their purchase because they know there's stuff in there they're going to have to fix, and that's their plan anyways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when I'm working that shift, right, we actually are able to flip that in the converse, and that becomes leverage for us when we're actually looking to buy a property. We can tell the seller, listen, we're waiving that. We're not worried about what we find, basically, right? We're not worried about what we find because we plan on coming through and getting rid of that wall anyway, right? So in some ways, it makes us more appealing than the conventional or the traditional buyer, because the conventional or the traditional buyer, they want to have that looked at because, again, remember, that's that emotional tie. They want to have that house viewed because they want to know that they're getting what they paid for, right?
Right. No, that's right.
They want to know because in their mind, they don't see it as we have to educate them that they are paying a price per square foot, that the value of the home is related to the idea of the property, right? And the real property. And the price per square foot is what is gaining them. It has nothing to do, well, I shouldn't say nothing, but the value is not because of the fact that it has this functioning or that functioning or it doesn't. But a lot of people feel that that's the case. And so the inspection period through a conventional, I try to educate my buyers that this is the opportunity to make sure, and our goal here is to not make sure that you're getting what you paid for. We want to make sure that what you're purchasing is safe and move in ready. And we are not going to be worried about the small things that the inspector can see with their eyes that are like, girl, I've had it. The drain plug is missing out of the shower. Like, we're not worried about that. Your shower still
Yeah.
works. You can take a shower. You're not going to flood your bathroom by not having that, right? Like,
Yes.
it
Yes.
functions. All those things function and it's safe. What's most important here is we want to make sure that your heating and cooling work, right? We want to make sure that
Right.
the roof is sound. We want to make sure that you've got no, critters or problems, right? The big majors that are going to question safety. I mean, I've had inspections before where just that, those things have been called out, and then also been called out that the gas igniter in the fireplace may not be working. And I've got my buyer telling me that it's more important to have the plug in the shower replaced than it is to have someone fix the fireplace. I'm thinking, no.
That's hilarious.
I know. I know. That's $5 at Home Depot for the plug. I'd be happy to give that to you as your closing gift. You want to ask. You want to ask that the fireplace be fixed so you don't blow up your house when you go to turn the fireplace on. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
yes. Everybody wants and needs are different. Evidently.
Yeah, everybody's needs are different. So like I say, to go back, the wholesaling investing perspective is what it is, and we usually waive that because we know we're going to have things that we got to fix, right? And what we ultimately are doing on the wholesale side is we are basing our negotiations of the price based upon ultimately what we know the value is, minus what we know we're going to have to repair, and then what we know we want to achieve when we remarket the home. Okay, so that's that, and we're good with that. The conventional folks, like I say, the whole idea of the inspection period, in my mind, and what I educate, whether I'm representing the seller or the buyer, I educate them both, and I just say, this is the time for you to be willing to let your buyer know that the product that you're selling, your house, right, is safe. Yeah. And then the converse. This is your opportunity as the buyer to know that what you are purchasing is safe. And if it is safe, or there are some things that need to be addressed that you just don't know, then we have the opportunity to go back, right, to the seller, or the seller is to hear, and the seller is to, have the opportunity to fix and mend and move forward. And it doesn't matter whether it's this awesome offer that's right here, or like you said, you're taking backup offers. Unless that person is paying cash, unless that backup offer says cash and take as is, every single person is going to want to have that done because they want to know what they're buying is safe.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so it's important to understand that that's what that is and what that means. And that ultimately having a really good inspector, I will tell you that too, having a really good inspector, and I'm not talking about having a really good inspector meaning that they find all sorts of stuff that sends our clients on rabbit hole, down the rabbit hole, right? Yeah. I'm talking about having an inspector that is willing to take the time to educate either the seller or the buyer on why the findings that they found, and most importantly, that they're going to be willing to say, here are the things that define whether or not this house is safe and that you should present, right?
Exactly.
I've had some that are stellar, and I've had some that have had question marks, but I always appreciate the ones that take the time to open up the statement. We're here today because we're going to be identifying what is safe and what isn't safe. And those are the things that you want to address. Those are
No,
the best
exactly.
inspectors.
Yep. No, and that's exactly what that inspection period on that contract means. And I have seen buyers not really understand what that process means.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, and again, this is where it comes back down to the beginning again. It's very important to go over that buyer's consultation or that seller's consultation when you're going over that. Bring up that contract, show them a blank copy of the contract, explain to them what the pieces of that contract mean. Because we need to educate our public on what that means for them.
Yeah.
And because when you do come across those stages of that, that part where it's like, okay, well, I got the house on the contract and, we're in a 7-day inspection period. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, I got an inspector who's a best friend of mine and, they're going to go ahead and look, okay, what is that best friend going to educate you
Yeah.
on the house and what it really means, is whether it's a good deal or not, or are they going to go and nitpick every little thing that you might nitpick, because you're nitpicking and what they're inspecting are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
They really are. So it's just really important when you go over that contract. Like I said, it's detrimental for the agent to just go ahead and take that time to explain it to that buyer. I just had it's funny because, this, people don't understand how important the contract is. And some people will just go and just do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And not realize that, like just for instance, a handshake. Just because you handshake with somebody does not mean that, well, they told me that they're going to let me, buy this house and they were going to work with me, and so I'm going out, and all of a sudden they're going to like, well, I'm going to, I did have somebody say, I'm going to go out and give this person some, the due diligence amount to them in their hand. I'm like, whoa. What were you about to do?
Yeah.
that's not how we we do this kind of type of transaction. So your buyers and your sellers, they really have to understand what it means, and it's so important to have an agent to go with you and do, and negotiate for you and fight for you and talk for you, so that you don't get wrapped up into something you just can't get out of.
Yeah.
So, or hurt you, you know what I mean? So, I just encountering that this week had just been it really does take a toll on you, because it's like, I know I can talk to them, and I know they understood. Sometimes you'll have to keep talking about that contract all the way through the process.
Oh yeah.
You are that agent and you're protecting your client, and you want to make sure you reiterate with them throughout the process that, hey, listen, your due diligence is due the third day, 3 business days from now, and we need to get that in. It's like, okay, no problem. Okay, and it is your duty as an agent to say, okay, great, we got that in. All right, so now your inspection period is going to end on so-and-so date. So let's make sure that we have everything we need. Oh, there's a problem? Okay, so then me as an agent needs to go and say, okay, so we need to get an addendum done so that we can get either an extension if the seller is willing to do so. And, it's up to me and that listing agent, together as agents, even though we're working for 2 different companies, doesn't matter.
Yep.
We're in this deal, and we want to make sure that everything on both sides are taken care of. So it's important to know your job and your role, and it's important for you to even know the other roles as well, because sometimes somebody may not know. You know what I mean? So it's just really important. I just wanted to stress that this week because I experienced it. It was so crazy.
Yeah, and I think
somebody almost went away and gave their due diligence to somebody in hand. I was like, oh, no.
Well, and I think it's, having the grace, right, for yourself if you've made, error, or, if you don't understand something, being able to ask, and realize that it's okay. We don't all do the same thing. And at the same time, I think if our industry could break its barriers just a little bit, there would be
Mm-hmm.
more opportunity for cohesive conversation, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
so, and I shouldn't say we're because I'm not part of it, but people are so competitive that we lose sight, or they lose sight of that opportunity to be humans and have conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, there have been times where I've received contracts, back, or in that negotiation phase related to the inspection, and pushing for something, and the opposing agent, being obstinate, and at the end of the day, if we would have just had one or two more conversations to understand why we were pushing for what we were pushing, ultimately it
Mm-hmm.
may have been mediated and resolved before a third person had to come in and tell them that it needed to be fixed. And I'm saying this from a standpoint of, there was recent purchase, transaction that we were doing, and it was a fix and flip job, that
Mm-hmm.
had taken place. Beautiful job. And my buyers were purchasing this home, and due to the pandemic, unfortunately, the home was not outfitted with standard fixtures. Um,
Mm-hmm.
refrigerators are not a standard thing. Washers and dryers are not a standard thing, and in resale and or new construction.
Mm-hmm.
But stoves and dishwashers are. But with the pandemic, it has really created some conundrums, right?
Yeah.
With appliances, with anything, door handles. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like, we're talking about very basic things. And I understood when the seller said, hey, they're not in home because of
Mm-hmm.
XYZ. But ultimately, here in our state of Texas, in order to receive a conventional loan, those things have to be in the home before close. And we asked for those things at multiple phases of the negotiation, and
Yeah.
insistent. And then eventually it was like, listen, now the lender is telling you that it's Texas law that these have to be in there. They
Yeah.
got to be in there. We're not telling you this just because we want you to pay for them, right? Or what have you. We're telling you that it's the law, and this is why we're asking for what we're asking for.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that goes back to, not only the education part, the openness and the willingness of professionals as agents to be willing to have more conversations, and then being willing to learn from each other, and set aside that testosteronal, if you will, attitude, and realize that sometimes we're just saying what we're saying because it is true. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
lie and work in a negotiation. We're saying what we're saying, and rightfully so. If this is what identifies the house to be safe, this is what needs to be done in order to identify the house to be safe, not to justify its value. Does that make sense?
No, and that's exactly right. And it comes back to, a lot of the times when that's what that inspection period is for. It's to explain, or not even inspection, just in general. You as the agent, you have to understand your role, and with that role, it comes across. Your job is to educate everyone
Mm-hmm.
that's involved, and when you come down to it, like you said, with your situation, that could also be a potential for you not to even inspect for insurance properties,
Right.
for insurance as a
Right.
whole.
Right.
Because if you're a buyer, not necessarily for a wholesaler, because they still just have to have the just the bare minimum to do what they need to do. But even at the end of the day, if they decide they want to flip that house and sell it, and there's a problem where your insurance company or any insurance company is not going to insure that home at closing, before closing. That's something you need as an agent to say, hey, listen, we're asking for this because, and then that other agent is to listen and say, okay, well, that makes sense. Let me go talk to my, seller, and let's see if we can work out something, to make it happen.
Yeah.
That whole process again is for you to know as an agent how to protect your client and understand that, okay, I get that you found it, because any insurance company, some insurance companies will just do whatever. Obviously, they are out there, but then you have the ones that are just like, okay, which are the ones that you probably say, okay, well, you know what, I can cover it. However, we need to have it done because it still needs to be corrected, during that period where you're getting ready to close. Safety is a thing, and that contract not only seals that deal for that. You as the agent must know that for your client and say, okay, listen, in order for you to be safe in your home, your new home, let's get this done. Let's ask the seller to do this, or let's ask, let's make sure that this is applied so that, they can, even if we don't take the house, they're going to still have to do it anyway. Because by law, this is what we need to do.
Totally.
So it's important. It's very important. So that's why I just want to make sure I stated over and over and over again in this call, in this meeting today. It's like, let's just know our job. Let's know our role. And if we're out here and we're serving as agents and we're doing our job and enjoying it, then, educate. Don't be afraid to ask questions either. That is our role as agents. We want to make sure that, we handle our clients well.
Yeah.
Here in Florida as well. So, everybody wants to come to Florida. Everybody wants to come to Texas,
Yeah.
And you want them to reach out to you because they say, oh, well, you know what? Mandy in Texas is an excellent agent because she does protect, her clients. She knows what she's talking about. She takes the time, even if she doesn't know, she will ask.
Yeah.
And hey, Marilyn in Florida, she's a great agent. She may not know everything because I don't.
Nope.
However, she is not afraid to ask.
Well, and
she will find out.
We've not had every experience, right? And so I hope, as our goal about the idea of collaboration, it stems much bigger than that, right? It should not be this tug and pull, right? When we are working with other agents,
Yeah.
A lot of other agents have always complimented on how easy, it is to work with me and how we stay on time and just easygoing, just period. And I bring that up only just because I do believe that I don't know everything. And I'm going to do my best to know it, and I'm going to do my best to work with it. But I want to be able to know that this agent and I that are working together, although we are representing our clients and we owe our due diligence to them, at the end of the day, though, we're establishing a working relationship together, and we need to be able to collaborate with each other, and we need to be able to keep our people on time, right? We need to be able to work together to educate our people, educate each other, and being able to accept that and give it is extremely important, so again, as we've talked about today, the importance of contracts and the importance it is to be great educators, not only to our clients, but back and forth between the agents, the title company, the lender, whatever it is, whomever's involved in the whole transaction. It's super huge, and that ties back to exactly the purpose behind what we're doing here. We want to let other agents out there know that collaboration is important, and it means a lot more than just hanging out and getting together, right?
Yeah.
Or calling always on that person. And education means a lot more than just what you're doing with your clients. It can be interfacing with all facets of the parties related to the transaction. I think this week's topic of contracts certainly put out a lot more ideas than just what does this mean and what goes where, because that wasn't what our goal was. It wasn't about reminding
Mm-hmm.
everybody that you have 3 days or you have 5 or you have 10, you know.
Right.
The main goal is just reiterating here the importance of being well educated, understanding what it really means, that it's not just a blank that you're filling in, um,
Mm-hmm.
and the working relationships that go behind it. So good topic.
Absolutely.
Good topic. So
Yay, yay. But so I'm excited that we were able to talk about that. But now that we only have a few minutes left,
hmm.
um, we're going to start with you, Mandy. Tell us where you are and kind of get everybody to know where they can find you.
Yes. So Mandy St. Imes, I'm here in Texas, Monarch Movement Real Estate Group. Work with not only relocation but investors. So if anyone's out there looking for a new move or you're looking to fix and flip, buy and hold, I'm your gal. And I am here in Frisco, Texas. Collin County, North Texas is where I serve, brokered by eXp Realty. And Verlin?
Awesome. Awesome. Yes. And of course, my name is Verlin Porter. I'm with Florida Realty and Commercial, LLC, and we are located here in Florida. We're actually located in Brevard County. However, we are working to build our goal to be all over Florida. So we just don't focus on Brevard. We focus on Central Florida. I'm willing to go down to Miami, Boca Raton, Daytona Beach. So we do the north side, we do the south side, west side, east side.
She's all the sides.
Florida. All the sides. And I focus on buyers, definitely for the buyers. So you can find me on Instagram for the Verlin for the buyers. And you can also find me on Facebook Live or Facebook in general. But I am here and we're always looking to help that buyer, that seller sell their house. Our vision is, you have your vision, you have your goal and your dream, and we want to meet that vision and that goal and that dream. So I'm excited to be here in Florida.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Verlin. And we will be back on again, the second Saturday of
the second
March.
Saturday of March.
That's right.
Yes, that is correct, and that falls on the line of. We already are in March, aren't they? The 12th of March.
The 12th of March. Okay. All right.
12th of March. We'll be right back again.
All right. Yay! Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate being able to collaborate with you. And
yes,
we will see you then on the 12th.
All right. See you then.
Have a great week.
Bye. Bye. You too.